Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Josh Long. Just quickly, I'm about to give a talk on Cloud Foundry. I work for SpringSource, a division of VMware. Our booth is plumb out of giveaways, but we have socks if you like. So please, raise your hand if you like that while we're talking. Okay, guys, we have so much to talk about and so very little time. So let's get started. My name is Josh Long. Like I said, that's my Twitter handle, my email. josh.long@springsource.com. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. If you leave this talk more confused than when you came in, then this is a good way to get in contact. I've written 4 books on Spring and various technologies. I'm working on my 5th, which is Cloud Foundry in Action. I am a committer on several SpringSource projects like these, Find projects, Spring Integration, Spring Batch, etc. And more to the point, I got this guy to use Cloud Foundry. Okay? I mean, that's how good this stuff is. I got the muscles from Brussels to get into this, So, yeah. Okay, moving on. We have so very little time. It's always important to remember why we're here, right? I always use this slide a lot. It's important to avoid reinventing the wheel. And I think the platform as a service is a great way to do this, right? It removes all but the concerns of your code from your problem domain, right? So you can focus on what's important, which is just code. Cloud Foundry is an open source platform as a service from VMware. When we talk about it, we typically talk about 3 different parts of the equation, right? We talk about runtimes, languages, frameworks that are supported. Out of the box, we support Java-based workloads, so Tomcat, of course, and Scala, Grails, Clojure, all that stuff works just very nicely. We also support Ruby on Rails, Sinatra-based workloads, Node.js, and others. We have an ecosystem full of other implementations that have taken the code and they've added extra runtimes and languages. So there are well-supported Python, PHP, and other derivatives. And of course, enthusiasts have taken the code and added support for things like Haskell and Erlang. Okay. When we talk about choice, that's another big part of Cloud Foundry. It's another part of the attraction. We typically talk about this very, very famous song. How many of you guys know Hotel California by the Eagles? It's like the one song that everybody knows, It just we use ex-VMware CEO Paul Moritz famously described the Hotel California problem. This is something we're trying to avoid with Cloud Foundry. We don't want you guys to be locked in. We want you guys to have an open cloud into which you can check in and you can leave if you like. I think this point is no better demonstrated than in this Google App Engine ticket from about April 8th, 2008. It's basically a request for PHP support in Google App Engine, okay? Eventually, 3,000 people went to this ticket and they said, I want PHP support. I would pay money for PHP support. I would pay money that costs money for PHP support. Please. And that's, kind of an overwhelming, sign of interest. Eventually, a Googler came to the ticket in January 2011 and said, shut up, and they closed the ticket, right? So, not very good. That's a proprietary closed cloud. You don't get your way, and it takes them years to tell you no, right? Erstwhile, when we open sourced Cloud Foundry on GitHub in April of 2011, within weeks there was a pull request adding PHP support for Cloud Foundry, right? So the difference here is very, very stark. It takes years for a proprietary closed cloud to say no. It takes weeks for an open source platform as a service to say yes. Okay, very, very important. We have a virtual machine you can download from micro.cloudfoundry.com. It provides a complete replication of Cloud Foundry in a virtual machine, so if you're on a plane or a train or an automobile and you don't have Wi-Fi or access, like at this conference, for example, you can work with the cloud, right? Very, very powerful. And you can also debug your applications from your IDE and so on. It's intuitive. Finally, we talk about services. Services describe things like Postgres and RabbitMQ, infrastructure, pieces that take a long time to set up, and whether in production and you're trying to tune for production, or whether you're a developer and you're trying to get started and bootstrap your environment, there should be no reason that this stuff is hard, right? It should be very easy to get a database or a message queue set up. You don't want to be scared of trying new things, right? Best practices encourage you to use a cache where appropriate. Why does it have to be hard? Bring a cache in, use Redis. Redis, by the way, how many of you guys have heard of Redis? Redis is a open source project. It's actually sponsored by VMware. It's used by a lot of small mom and pop shops. How many of you guys have heard of Stack Overflow? Bazillion requests, right? They're using Redis. So MongoDB, another one of those things that small, tiny little companies are using, for small workloads, or not, much bigger workloads maybe, MySQL, Postgres, RabbitMQ, etc. Lots of different services. And of course, because it's open source, and because other people have created versions of Cloud Foundry as well, you might find, for example, in our .NET-based Cloud Foundry, Uhuru and Tier 3 have a .NET supporting Cloud Foundry. In those clouds, you have support for SQL Server and things like that, right? So the services tend to change, and they vary based on the supported languages. But this is a very interesting part of the technology. Okay, so that was the kind of like 5-minute, like high-level marketing introduction. Let's actually take a look at this, okay? In action, okay? In action, okay? First things first, I've got a little bit of code here. I went to github.com/Cloud Foundry samples, and I've checked out the Spring MVC Hibernate template, cloned it into my directory here, and I've already I've done the due diligence of actually building the code. So it's in my Maven directory here. I'm going to be uploading this code to Cloud Foundry. I want to actually get started. So the first things first, making this font much bigger. Yeah, you guys can see that. Okay, so I'm going to say vmc target.api.cloudfoundry.com. This tells VMC that I want to talk to the cloud that's hosted on cloudfoundry.com. Because it's open source and because you can run it in your own data center and you can run it on other people's clouds, you have to tell it which one you want to talk to. There's not one Cloud Foundry. It's different environments, right? It's just like Git or Subversion. You wouldn't expect Subversion to just know about one server. So I'm targeting api.cloudfoundry.com. I'm going to go ahead and log in. By the way, if you have questions, send email to this email. Okay. And then once I'm logged in, I can now ask the cloud some questions. I can ask it how things are going. So I can say, how many apps do I have? VMC apps. I've got 2 apps deployed right now. They both depend on this data source called Postgres. And here are the URLs for the existing apps. I can ask it things like, what does my account look like? What's the URL that I'm targeting? How much RAM do I have? How many services do I have provisioned, etc.? In this case, I want to go ahead and push. I want to go ahead and deploy this code that we've just checked out, and I've built it already, okay? It's just a regular Java var. It's going to interview me. So the first things first, do I want to push to this cloud from this directory? Yes, I do. Thank you. What's the name of the application? Hello, Devox 2012. Okay. It's detected a Java Spring application. Sure. I'm going to go ahead and say no, just so we can see some of the other options, but it is indeed a Java Spring application. So for example, if it had been another type of application, this particular Cloud Foundry instance could support those other types. So Node and Sinatra and basic Java web applications and Lift and Grails and so on, right? Play, etc. So I'm going to go ahead and choose number 2, or I could choose 5. They're both the same thing in this case. It's going to give me a URL. I can change the URL, but by default, it's going to assume that I'm going to want the URL for my application that I used as the application name. So hello.devox.cloudfoundry.com. Okay. How much RAM do I want? Very interesting question. 512 is more than enough. How many instances do I need? Well, 1. Fair enough. Yeah. Groovy. Okay, so my application... Oh, come on. So my application needs access to different services, right? So first things first, my application talks to a relational database. So I need Postgres. So I'm going to go ahead and say, no, I don't want to bind existing services. But yes, I would like to create 2 services. First things first, a Postgres instance, please. I'm going to accept the default name, no problem. And I need a cache. I need Redis, because my application uses caching. So I'm going to go ahead and say, yes, create a Redis instance for me. Accept the default name. I can choose. The name doesn't matter in my case. I can make it matter if I want. It's entirely up to you. And that'll do, right? So I don't need anything else. We've just done a lot, actually. We've gone through this little interview process. We've taken some code, and we've told Cloud Foundry to please provision an application server and 2 different types of databases, all in a matter of a few minutes. And I can tell because there's a clock in front of me that says it's been a few minutes. But nonetheless, I wouldn't want to have to do this each time. So it's going to make it easier for me to do it, to iterate quicker by letting me write out all this information to a file called a manifest, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and say, yes, I'd like to save this configuration. And that manifest will be consulted next time. So next time I deploy this application or update it or work with it, it'll check the manifest first. And if there's anything, if there's anything there, it'll just use that. It won't ask questions. Makes it very, very quick to iterate. Right now, it's pushing the application. Happily, I've pushed this application before. And when you work with Cloud Foundry, it only transmits the deltas. It caches the jars. So you don't have to retransmit a var or whatever each time, right? You're just transmitting the things that have changed. So it's very quick, even on this inferior Wi-Fi and internet connectivity. So VMC apps. Okay, there's my app, right? And here's the URL, and there's the services bound to it. If I go to my browser, punch it in there, you can actually see I've got the application up and running. Things are working, right? If I look up data, you know, I can actually do searches and so on. My name is Josh Long, right? So there's my information. If I log in, I want to actually look at the database. I actually want to, you know, tinker around with the SQL statements that are happening in the background. I can do VMC tunnel, and then I want to log into the Postgres instance that this application is using. So I'm going to log into Postgres SQL -98242, okay? And it's going to ask me which one do I want to log into. So I'm going to say number 1, right? This one here. Enter. What this will do is it'll actually create a proxy, local proxy that connects to the remote database on the cloud, inside the cloud. So I can actually log into it and work with it. This is very important because, you know, as developers, you and I are already very content that our application has been provisioned and started and all that stuff. But your operations people, those poor people, they go home and they have to carry that beeper, you know, they have to keep it under their bed like a Bible. It's very important. They can't afford to go to sleep and not worry about the databases. They need their own, you know, offline analytics scripts. They need their access and all that stuff and their backups and everything. So this tunnel is an ideal way to do that. It's a way for you to talk to the database in a secure way while not actually having, you know, hard-coded information. The tunnel starts up a connection, and it actually gives us a username, a password, and a schema name. I can take those values and put them into any kind of visual tool I want, or put them into the pSQL, you know, command line tool. And there are similar values for MongoDB and Redis and so on if you use the tunnel. But this tool actually goes one step further. It's not just created a tunnel for us. No, this is the most friendly, most useful, most kind command line tool in the history of command line tools, right? Not only has it created a tunnel for us and given us the username and value, password and schema name, but it's offered to start up a local client on our local machine for us and plug in the values for us. This is really nice. This is like if you had like if you were petting a cat, and then when you were done petting the cat went out and found you another cat to pet with, you know? This is a very friendly tool. So I'm going to go ahead and say pSQL, please start that up. It's going to go ahead and plug in the values for me, connecting to localhost on port 10,000 with those values. And voila, I'm actually in the database. I can interact with it as if it was running locally. Select all from customer. So you can see my information there is number 7. My name is Josh Long. When I go back to the application, I can update it, right? Now, I'm going to tell you guys something, just a little secret between you and me. When I was a youngin', about this high, about half a foot, I always knew that when things were going to go bad between my, you know, whenever I did something bad, I always knew that my mom would call me Joshua. And that was when I knew things were going to be uncomfortable. So, you know, I'll go ahead and change it to my given birth name there. Save Joshua. And I can reissue the query, and you can see the information's been updated on the cloud, right? So this is an application that we've built in a matter of minutes. We've actually provisioned an application server. We've provisioned 2 different types of databases. We've actually logged into the database and managed to work with the schema and so on. And we can see the fruits of our labor before us, right here on the URL that we've provisioned. Cloud Foundry itself is open. Foundry itself is open source. It's right now not GA, it's beta. There are other versions of Cloud Foundry, like AppFog, for example, and Staccato, that have support for other kinds of services above and beyond what we have in the core. You can go to core.cloudfoundry.com to get an idea of the compatibility between different implementations. And if you like, you can use them and pay them, or you can wait for the GA version of Cloud Foundry, which we hope will be by the end of the year. Cloudfoundry.com, that is. Next year, we hope to have a private, you know, supported in your data center version of Cloud Foundry as well. Okay, I think, my friends, that is all. So we've actually got everything. Now we have about a minute for questions. Going once. Any questions? Yep, you, my friend. You guys pricing yet? On this, no, but again, other vendors, other implementations have. So for example, AppFog has pricing, and they'll give you different supported SLAs and so on. Yep, next. Off the top of my head, I don't know. Do you know? 2. Oh, 2, but I don't know what minor revision, obviously. 2 what? 2.0. Just, there you go, flat. Anybody else, my friends? In the back? I'm looking around. Okay. Thank you very much, guys.